Alright, I've got all the parts painted and ready for assembly. Let's see how this works with pre-painting them on the sprue and then just touching them up. Basically, I've got the first step here. I'm taking some of the parts off. Need a number 5. So let's find A5. And where is A5? There it is. Okay. Okay, so what I like to do is I always like to clip a little bit away from the part, leaving a little bit of the sprue on there, and then come back in and trim it down. So I'm going to cut it a little closer and then a little closer. That way you don't get any stress fractures from the sprue itself. Okay. Okay, looking pretty good. Now I do have a little bit to clean up, so I'm going to take my sanding stick here. It's a medium grit. So we're going to get rid of that nub. Now this is going to get rid of some of the paint, so we will have to dash it with a little bit of the paint from the bottle. And hopefully I won't have to respray these. If the nub is still quite a bit there, I can take my knife and clean it up. Alright. Now one of the other options I can do, which I may have to end up going to do, but we'll see how well this works, is to do what a lot of the motorcycle and car builders do, is they'll get a block of foam and they will take toothpicks and they'll mount every single part on a toothpick after cleaning it up. Then mark on the actual foam the part number and then stick the part with the toothpick into that area. And that way they can actually just spray, they can pick the part out, spray it, and put it back. So I was trying to avoid that, but let's see how it goes. We'll give it a little bit of a brush here. Got our black that we just sprayed with. A little bit of thinner here. And in theory this should, no it's not, this particular part's not going to show up very well on the camera because it's black. Make sure it's wiped down pretty well of all the dust of the sanding. And I can even go in with a finer sanding stick to polish out the sanding marks from the other stick. Let's do that real quick. Okay. Okay, so now wipe it down, cloth here, and being that it was actually gloss black underneath, all it has done is made it a little bit glossy. So I'm going to take my brush, put it in some thinner, get it working, and then I'm going to put it in the paint. Wipe a little bit of it off, and we'll try to get this thin enough that we can do this in one brush stroke. So we're just going to do that. That. Okay. Flip it around. Try to do the other side. To me, paints paint really well when they're thinned. They do not like to be painted twice. They will tend to pull up, so that's why I try to get it to do it in one stroke. Okay, we're going to let that dry and see how that technique worked for us. Okay, it looks like the touch-up technique is actually going to work pretty well. I did screw up that ear. I actually painted it black instead of the dark blue, so I repainted that. The other thing is, as handling the parts, I noticed I was scuffing the paint even though it was dry, so I put on a pair of cotton gloves so I can handle the stuff a little bit better. Also pressing in the parts, I have been putting glue on them, although some of them fit tight enough it's like a snap together. I did have to touch up a few places where I scuffed up the paint by just handling it, but doing that, and then wherever there's paint that was hand brushed that is a little glossy, the dull coat in the final stage will get rid of that completely. So I'm going to continue with the assembly, doing some of the, this is one of the Fox's eyes, which is orange clear. So one thing I will do when I do my dull coat and my weathering on the end is I will use this micro mask to paint over it as a masking material, and then paint and weather, and then I'll be able to peel that off. So, let's see, we've got this in this position, and this one looking like so. Again, real tight fit. I can glue them in if I wish. This particular one is nice that it is a pressure fit, so I don't have to risk screwing up any of the clear with the glue. But that orange eye on that flat blue, dark blue is going to look very excellent. So we will continue with doing the parts, and then as I hit snags, I will come back on and do another report and show you how things are going. Okay, one other thing I'm going to show you before I get really into the build is one of the things on the workflow of the instructions. Sometimes I'll skip an area, so I don't forget what I've done and what I haven't done. I will actually mark through with a pen what parts I have actually assembled, and that way I can keep track of that. Okay, so I'm making some progress. Excuse me, I've got a little cold. I finished the head here, which is coming out pretty decent. His teeth did fall out once, so instead of having a toothless little wolf, I had to glue them in. I put them in and then put a little bit of glue on there, just enough to tack it in case I needed to take them apart. But anyways, he came together on the head pretty good with little touch-ups. The final assembly of putting the two sides together was a little rough, trying to get all the things lined up, but then snapping it together worked pretty good. This is the next step. Again, there's a couple of these little polycap parts, which are kind of a rubbery plastic, and they're made for joints. So I had to make sure that got in there correctly, and then you basically have to press these together till they snap. They'll make kind of a popping noise. That way you know they're actually together and pretty secure. This piece here had another polycap, so it could actually move forward. They're pretty rough to move though, so I don't know if I'm going to be wanting to move this after it's done. Basically, I'm going to try to keep this together and pose it and be done with it, because I think trying to move these, you'll end up just tearing the whole thing apart. So we're going to hit that this piece with a little bit of paint. You can see up here on the top, which may not matter, but kind of just depends on where it comes out. So we are just going to thin some of the Tamiya paint here and just hit that section. And I think there's some on the bottom here, yep. So basically what I'll do is I'll paint the whole section instead of just trying to touch up the scar. That way it's more uniform. Okay. So it looks pretty good so far. So we will continue on that and start working on the body and the legs.